Off you go. Yeah, what was
Okay,
that?
so we're talking about the recycling debacle that's going on in Australia at the moment, where no one quite knows what the state of the red cycle and the plastic bags and the acres of warehouse storage that's been filled up with these plastic bags. One of my neighbors years ago was an executive at a recycling company, and I actually reached out to him. I think I got him through LinkedIn, and had a chat to him years after we'd sort of separated, and asked him how it all worked and what the deal was, because there's a lot of stuff around at the moment. The state governments and the councils are offering money for 5 cents for your tin or 5 cents for your bottle, kind of like South Australia has done for years. And I asked him about that and about how the whole recycling thing worked, and he said one of the hardest things is the white goods. So you get a washing machine, you can't just stick it through a through a masher, another machine that mashes it up and get all the components out of it, because everything's so big and bulky, and it needs human labor, and of course that means it's very expensive to recycle that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a shame, right? Because there's a lot of copper in motors, in washing machines, and dishwashers, and there's sheet metal, and there's some electronics, and there's all sorts of good stuff in them.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't last forever, so sometimes you need to chuck them out and get a new one because it's cheaper than repairing. And I don't know if you've ever had a washing machine repaired, but it's not great.
No.
And I asked him about the electronics goods, and he said, well, electronics like TVs and smaller stuff is not too bad, because they can put it through a few different processes and use machinery and chemicals and whatever to separate everything out. The gold, the silver, whatever's on the contacts in the electronics, they can just blast through it and separate it out using chemical engineering and process engineering, basically. Mm-hmm. which is really cool. And eventually that lowers the price of it, right? You can just dump a whole bunch of stuff into one hopper and you get different materials out the other end. That's the dream.
Yeah.
But it's not quite that way with plastics is a bit harder, because it all looks the same, and but it all has different compositions. So you either need to burn it, melt it, or scrap it up, or something. I don't know. But it's very difficult. So he said that the plastics is a little bit harder. But the interesting thing he said, and I didn't get a chance to quiz him in great detail, and I'm not sure if he would have told me, being given his position, but he said that where the money comes from with the 5 cents, etc., for the bottles, it costs a lot more than that to actually do the recycling job itself. So I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, anyways, sorry guys, I already started recording as Benny was chatting, but we have Benny in here today, and we're going to talk about I don't know, we're just going to talk. I've never really talked to Benny personally in real life. This isn't really real life, is it? This is just on the internet still. Anyways, with recycling plans, I kind of, like, for instance, in Australia, it's 10 cents. It's 10 cents to recycle a plastic bottle. In Germany, it's 25 cents euro. So if you were to convert that across, it's probably about 40 Australian cents. But I don't understand how, it's going to cost more than that, especially now with energy costs here. I don't understand how they can afford to pay that and to keep doing it. But yeah, this plastic recycling, I think waste in general is, like when we talk about renewable futures and, and looking after the environment, I think the key isn't necessarily carbon emissions or energy production. It's the waste. It's just the waste we have. There's so much potential there for, well, not just recycling, but generating electricity or generating gas or generating lots of heat or things like that just from waste. And a lot of effort goes into like these dodgy like, I don't know, what would you call them, like scams, or like these white elephant projects that go in, like when we
I think a lot of people don't understand how much energy is involved in just surviving. Northern Europe, North America, pretty cold places, Canada, Alaska. Pretty tough to live there. I saw a mini documentary on the old Twitters a few months ago, which was interesting, where they're growing bugs in Canada, and as an environmental concept to reduce emissions from eating cows, I guess.
these bug people.
Canada, and so Yeah, bug people. Yeah, no, they're crazy. But well, better than lizard people. That's a whole different conversation, right?
Oh,
But
no.
the guy was there talking about and he had this massive barn. It was industrial, almost industrial feedlot, but it was just pens and boxes of insects all over the place, and it was large. Let's put it that way. And then he the whole time he's talking about controlling the environment, so which is basically maintaining the air temperature
Heat.
and the ventilation. And then he walks outside and it's like 6 foot deep in the snow. He's talking about maintaining sort of 28 degrees indoors, and I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, mate! The energy you're using in this enterprise must be astronomical, and the only way it could ever be profitable was if the government was propping it up.
Yep.
Using the old taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and see, this is where I go. Like, we spend so much time on these little side projects and these little white elephants when there's like abundant resources there to use. I know a lot here in there's a lot of farmers around close by who are making biogas from their waste. From their waste products, which is, that's an easy.
But that's an expensive process as well. Biofuels, if you have to grow something,
yes,
and then harvest it, and then process it, and at the end of all that you get some kind of hydrocarbon or fuel source. That's expensive, right? You can't just dig it up or extract it out of the ground and it's automatically a fuel source. So your uranium, your coal, your gas, your oil, all those things are combustible or usable in the first instance. They're primary energy, right? They're not this thing where you need another machine and another process and a bunch of people and labor processes, then a few trucks and maybe a train and then another machine. And at the end of it, you get something useful.
Yeah.
All that's very, very costly. When you talk, hydrogen's a perfect example of that. Hydrogen's worse than batteries in the energy cycle. I mean, Germany's apparently going to be all over the hydrogen pretty soon. You'll be a beneficiary of that. Surely.
No, I'm not going to be. No, I'm not going in that direction. I don't know where their obsession with this comes from. Like, I don't get it. They're the only country in Europe with this obsession for hydrogen, and the only thing I can figure it out, like the only reason I can figure out is that the car industry obviously still has a big leeway here with Audi, Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes, and Opel. So they're creating lots of cars, but I just don't see the demand for anything but diesel. I don't care.
Well, the problem with hydrogen. Yeah, there's many problems with hydrogen. I mean, you could talk about how you got to spend a lot of energy to make it. Then you've got it's difficult to store because of the pressures or the very low temperatures you need to use it, and then it's the smallest molecule, so it leaks at a high rate. You've also got it's very, very low ignition energy. So when you're talking about the flammability of gases and products, they talk about the joules, or probably in America the BTUs or whatever. But I'm in an SI units country, so I'll talk about joules. And when you're looking at the flammability of gases, there's a few different categories, and one of them is ignition energy. And hydrogen has a very low ignition energy, whereas compared to methane is it'd be amiss of me to say it's difficult to ignite, but it's a whole lot harder to ignite than hydrogen, that's for sure. And so when you think about methane exists in nature as a product which you can just pull it out of the ground at 98% purity and then stick it in an engine of a generator, say, which is basically a petrol car type engine, a reciprocating engine, 4-stroke, and you can get electricity out of it. Whereas to make hydrogen, first of all, you've got to actually extract it from methane or from water. And like we said before, the whole process has to come in front, and then you've got something that might be useful. But hydrogen has got these dangers and these risks that come with it, which pretty much nothing else does. It's difficult to say where the enthusiasm comes from, except from maybe a touch of ideology and I don't know. Willful ignorance.
I think it's close. I don't know if you saw it. You probably did because you're up to date with this type of stuff. But a couple of years ago, there was a Michael Moore documentary. It was Michael Moore of all people, and he went delving into renewable energy and the green energy sector, and just showing like how polluting it actually is, how it's basically just increasing the use of fossil fuels in the process. And I think hydrogen's like that. It's just a scam. It's, you know, there's so many input costs and so much input electricity to, as you were saying, and before you even end up with a final product that you could potentially use, you've already spent so much energy and so many resources to get to that point. I think, yeah.
But that energy, Andrew, that energy's free. Remember, it's net zero energy.
I know. It's free. Everything's free up until we get to this point. It's
just free.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it, man. Don't worry about it.
It reminds me of those people who, you know, you would probably know these people. Well, you might even be one yourself. But you know the people who will drive all the way across town to get 2 cents a litre cheaper petrol. Like if they drive, they're like,
I've assessed. I won't say I've committed to that, but the strategy, but I've assessed it. The fuel companies are getting cleverer. Actually, there's an app now, which is interesting. So, and there's an app which means, but it's better. It's actually a pretty good deal. So you can lock in. I think we use a 7-Eleven. You can lock in the cheap rate for a week. After it, even if it disappears from the shop. So you basically fill up, open up the app and you say, yep, I'm filled up, and you get a barcode on your phone. You walk into the store or the servo after you've filled up, and when you go to pay, he scans the barcode and you get last week's low cost petrol.
And does it work? Is that your local one, or do you drive across town to get it?
It's reasonably local. It's on the way to something else. So
well, okay. See, that's all right. That's all right. I just see these people. They look at only one element of the equation. They just look at one piece of the equation, and stick with that. But some of the biofuels I've seen here, there is there's a power plant out east. It's near a place called Whitewater or Weisswasser, and it is called Kraftwerk Boxberg, and it's a huge power plant. It is massive. It's a big boy, and it was due to be coming offline at some point. I think it was actually next year. It was supposed to be coming offline.
Is it a biomass? Is it a biomass? Is it a biomass or is it a nuclear?
It was coal. It was lignite.
Okay.
So they were using mostly lignite in that area, and now they've converted it because they shut down some of the boilers on it, but they wanted to convert it to bio waste. So what they're basically doing is they're taking sewage from people's houses, then they're drying it out, and then they're turning it into like pellets, and then they're putting those pellets into the old coal burner. but it's still more reliable and stable than the wind or solar. Like it is still. That's what I always say. Like burning.
Burning literal
shit is still better than solar. Like it is still.
Well, there's whole countries where the people who live in their shacks with a dirt floor burn literal shit, dried shit to stay alive, right? The dung burners. That's a whole chunk of India and a few other places. So there's quite a significant number of people, lots of zeros behind that number. But the thing with fossil fuel boilers, so a coal boiler or a biomass boiler, essentially they're basically the same. It's just a big contained explosion, really. You're burning the stuff, you're throwing it in there, and you're heating water, which turns into superheated, super pressure steam, and you get a steam turbine with a generator on the end of it. It's a complicated process, but the single biggest effect on those things is the moisture content of the fuel. So when you have a coal plant and they're digging it out of the ground, generally that's fairly consistent coal, the moisture content. But what they'll still do, they'll run it through like a drying process first, so they know what's going on. Because if you put a whole bunch of wet fuel into the boiler, it'll take a lot more time to turn that into heat, it has to dry in that combustion process before it'll actually create heat. And then what you'll find is your steam pressure drops, and all of a sudden you're kind of losing output. So it's a real problem. But when you're talking about biomass, biomass has a greater overhead on the front end of it, because it needs to. The biomass could come from anywhere. It could come from your local sewage plant. It could come from trees. It could come from a few places. And as a result, there's another overhead on top of that, which is realized in electrical power and labor and equipment and maintenance. All those things add on top. So your front end of those biomass plants needs this extra machinery. And so, of course, biomass costs more to run. You don't just dig it out of the ground, stick it on a conveyor, run it through a bit of a heater and into your boiler. You've got to do all sorts of stuff to it first to control it. Otherwise, you end up with a very intermittent output. Still better than a solar panel or a wind farm.
Still better.
It's not as good as coal or gas or nuclear, anything of those things that you've got a really good input to start with.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And see, that's why a lot of people will criticize, and there's a lot of criticism towards coal and gas, but they don't understand that aspect, that it's ready to go. It's like, as you said earlier, you just pull it out of the ground and it's ready to go. It's the product is already finished. It's complete. It's set. You might need a little bit of refining or something like that, a little bit of processing here and there, but it's not like fundamental, like to the actual structure of the coal. It's basically, it's still the same thing.
Yeah, you don't have to process it. You might have to just drop. You always have to pulverize it into a powder. But that's no matter what you do, you've got to treat it to some extent to be able to get it into the machine. But outside of that, you want the least amount of effort possible. Yeah. And coal, oil, and gas give you that.
Yeah, and then so if you're looking at it from a real basic bitch angle, you would look at solar and you'll say, yeah, but the sun is free. And you're like, well, yes, you're right. You're correct there. The sun is free. But how do you capture it? Like, what's the whole supply line here between capturing that sunlight and then putting it into a PowerPoint? How does that work?
Well, this is a very dangerous question, Andrew, because if you want the truth of the matter, it's going to hurt the feelings of a lot of people, and they're not going to like you anymore.
It's not going to.
They can call you names.
It's not going to hurt the feelings. It's going to hurt the investments. I was thinking yesterday, like, I get engaged in energy and climate change and things like that, and I don't really. I was trying to really define my position and where I would sit, and I'd say, yeah, okay, cool. So, I kind of accept that there are emissions going into the atmosphere, and they might be playing a role in the climate and blah blah blah. But okay, so I can accept that, but I draw the line there, because then everything else from that point on is done through modeling and computer simulations and models based on assumptions that are made by, they're not complete pictures. And so I think just being cautious with this is probably the best way. But then at the same time, what really gets me is that I saw a $1 trillion industry just spring up out of nowhere that's demanding no one ask questions of it, and that it has all the solutions if you just follow it. And I don't believe that. That sets my alarm bells ringing. That gets my alarm bells ringing.
You're not allowed to criticize it at all.
At all. No questions. The only question you can have is, how do we do more? And it's like, no. I can put science to one side and your belief in climate change on one side. Okay, that's over there. I want to address the industry. This industry it's shady. It's a sunny place for shady people, you could say, is the solar industry. And there's a lot going on there that's just a little bit, it sets my alarm bells ringing.
I don't blame the people involved. It's sort of the laboring level, the procurement level, even the investment level, the engineering level, the designing and the constructing, all that stuff. Like if someone came to me and said, I'm gonna give you a great job, go over and build this hydrogen plant, and I'd be like, I'd have to consider it, to be honest. A mate of mine's has done that actually, so I'm looking forward to some insights from him in the next year or so. But it's my criticisms and criticisms of people who are asking questions and want to know more about this shouldn't be directed at the people who are, just doing their day jobs basically. This is my criticisms are leveled at the lobbyists and the politicians. And the people with the big money players trying to make definite impacts on the system. So you got your Simon Holmes at court. Sorry, Simon. You got your Mike Cannon-Brookes. Sorry, Mike. You got your Turnbulls. Sorry, Turnbulls.
They've
so
probably,
you got all them.
They've probably got you blocked, all of them. Am I correct?
Actually, well, Twitter mate, Simon Holmes got blocked me pretty quick. I jumped up on Twitter. It must have been 2018 or 2019, and I'd never really given it much thought. And I jumped in there, and I was like, I'll just lurk for a while and see what's going on, and I'll follow a few people. And I did that, and then I started making a few comments, and it wasn't too long before I had a couple of hundred people follow me. So who cares? Not a big deal. And Simon Holmes at court started engaging with me, and then he started really challenging me about my beliefs on climate change and emissions reduction, all this stuff. And I'd come prepared. I hadn't started engaging with what's this then mindset. I'd come with some ideas and some thoughts, and I'd done a bit of thinking and reading, and to quite a lot of reading, to be honest. There was a quiet period at work there, and oh my goodness, the rabbits all went down. So as a result, and hopefully I'm mature enough to be able to chuck out some of the really stupid stuff. But the idea that Mr. Holmes at court blocked me for on Twitter was when he was going off at me about who makes all the emissions, and I said, well, humans make some and nature makes some, and then it came down to, well, in his opinion, nature didn't make any.
It just
and
appears.
I was like, well, hang on a second.
CO2 appears.
Yeah, exactly. Here's this thing I was reading earlier from NASA, and they've actually got what they call a satellite. Some people have heard of them. Elon Musk has a few up there, and NASA has a few, and China has a few, and all the rest of it. Even Australia might have a few. Who knows? And one of them is called the Orbiting Carbon Observatory, the OCO. So it's an interesting read, actually. So OCO number 1 blew up on the launch pad. OCO 2 made it up there and gave us some interesting stuff, and I think they're working on number 3 now, maybe a bit more, I don't know. But it's actually a really interesting project to look at. And OCO 2 gave us some really interesting stuff. So there's one particular page, they call them mission pages, and it's still up there. And this is one of my favorites because it talks about a period in, I think it's 2015, 2016, there was an El Nino or a La Nina. I can't remember which one is hot and dry, one of them.
El Nino's dry, I think. I think El Nino's dry. Right. I think. I don't know. I get confused.
La Nina is cold and wet or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was a hot dry one. And you had the three big rainforests around the equator. So you had Indonesia, you had something in Africa, and you had South America. And combined, and this is just the numbers from the NASA mission pages, the website, talks about the extra emissions were something like 2,500 gigatons. Now, Australia's total emissions is 0.5 gigatons, about 500 megatons a year. Speaking in round numbers.
Yeah.
So these three rainforests in a normal year, without a hot, dry, or a cold, wet, whatever, the average is something like, I don't know, 4 or 6. Someone will have to look that up and correct me and call me names for being a denier. I don't know. It's close enough. But the important part.
We're all deniers here, Benny. We're all deniers here.
Oh, good. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good in my bubble here. The Greens like their bubble. I can take my bubble. I'm taking it back. I want the rainbow back as well, so we can talk about that later. But PC. But okay, now back to NASA. So this orbiting carbon observatory, the satellite, which looks at instantaneous carbon coming out of the atmosphere and whatever. Mm-hmm. And they said that the the additional emissions in this 1 year were 5 times Australia's annual emissions. And I presented this to Mr. Holmes at court, and he blocked me.
Wow.
That's a culmination. It's a long wind up with a short ending.
Oh.
But evidence. You claim this. Here's some evidence. Well, I don't want to see that. Bye.
Exactly. That's the way it works. I've seen a meme. Someone holding a sign, and it says, "Of course, all the scientists will agree if you've blocked all the ones who don't." Like, it's very similar. I think Simon blocked me because he was saying how, oh, this is the good one. This is one of my favorites. You know, the levelized cost of energy. And they use the levelized cost, and he's always using the levelized cost for wind farms and solar farms. I say, yeah, okay, that's fine. But you can't claim it's cheaper if you then need to build backup. And you need to build. You're not incorporating the entire, the whole process.
Because the fine print on the LCOE excludes all that stuff.
Yeah.
By default.
It does. And it's like, no. But you're comparing apples and oranges here. I want something that's, a gas plant. Okay, I know the input costs, and I know it's going to produce this at about 80 to 90% efficiency. So it's going to do that. I want solar on the same level. So all the input costs, please, and then the backup to get it to 80 to 90% efficiency. And that's what I was blocked for.
Filthy denier.
I know. It's like, no, I just want to deal with numbers. I like numbers. I like facts. I like statistics. I can work with that. But this, just believe it or else mentality, this is actually where it got me to begin with. This is going back to 2007. 2007, Kevin Rudd was elected, blah, blah, blah. And the ABC then, I can remember there was Q&A was quite popular, but the ABC had a policy that they put out, and they said that the science is settled, the debate is over, and this was an editorial decision that they had made, and they said, okay, no more engaging in these ideas, and it just sent me off. I was like, no, hang on. You don't just come out and say the debate is settled or the debate is over when there was no debate. And it's like, this is a very complex system that you're trying to describe here. This is not just, you could have, was it? It wasn't Ivy Mike. It was the Castle Bravo shot. So it was the Castle Bravo nuclear test. It was the first thermonuclear weapon ever tested before. So you had the world's smartest physicists and scientists working head over heels on trying to design this bomb. They finally had the designs, the plans, everything had been modeled. They set it off, and it absolutely it went a little bit haywire. It was double the size they were expecting, and it almost wiped out a complete civilization somewhere in the Pacific. But they did that. That was the smartest people, and that was in a contained environment with known externalities coming into it, and they still got it wrong. And then you're trying to tell me that the whole global environment and the ecosystem can be monitored and predicted, even though we've got no evidence that it can be predicted properly. That sets my alarm bells off. That's all. It's like,
yeah, well, this is it, right? Because
I don't trust you.
They're advocating the remedy for the problem. So the climate change problem, the remedy for the problem is poverty.
Yeah.
For everybody. That doesn't work for me. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. That doesn't work for me either. It doesn't. This whole, we've got a problem. The answer is communism. This is not. This doesn't work with me. It just doesn't go.
Yeah.
But I think generally, like,
but you're not allowed to raise it, right? This is part of the communism, Marxism, whatever it is they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think they know they're doing it in that sense. I think a few of them probably have some inklings, but and there's I think there's some factions within the renewables lobby. There's some who actually think they're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
The useful idiots, and I put most of the teals in that bucket. Sorry, teals.
100%. 100%.
Oh God, they're hopeless. It hurts just thinking about it.
Oh no,
But
it hurts, man. It hurts.
You've got other people in there, like the political meddlers, like we talked about before. But you've got the lobbyists. But what bothers me is a lot of the academics and the media. So you've got a lot of academics out there who seem to thrive on this net zero idea. There's reports and studies and publications and peer reviews. You know, the whole shebang.
Mm-hmm.
And none of it stacks up. You get these people going, oh, here's our latest net zero Australia study, or how are we going to get 100% renewables, and then someone says 100% renewables. If that's in the lexicon for 6 months, someone's going to change it to 600% renewables within a very short time, right? And that's kind of what happened. You had the head of, was it the head of AMO was talking about 700% renewables on a podcast a couple of years ago, and you're like, they come out with these stuff, like you mentioned before, the modelling. The modelling is just crap. It just doesn't make any sense. Like they talk about these scenarios and all the rest of it, and you've got CSIRO in there as a linchpin. You've got the Australian Energy Market Authority's linchpin, but you've got all the Bloombergs and the Reuters, and Reuters actually not too bad. Bloomberg's got a whole net zero thing going on. I think they're a vested interest.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But it's
Bloomberg's pushing this hard.
Yeah, totally.
He's pushing this hard.
And this pushing it hard comes from there's the media and the academic side and the lobbyists. And Jesus, I wish there was you'd be a fly on the wall at some of these meetings, whatever they have. I don't know. Maybe it's just a WhatsApp group that's controlling the world at this stage. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think we have to. We don't really have to delve too far into it to see like what's going on, because this happens everywhere. This happens. It's not just limited to a climate debate, but you look at other things like Ukraine war, for instance. No questions, just fucking stump up the cash, give us the weapons, no questions asked. If you complain or if you show any signs of if you show any resistance to this at all, then we're going to banish you. If you don't like refugees hopping on boats and just rocking up on your shores, if you don't like that, well, we're going to shun you from polite society. We're going to kick you out. It runs with all these topics. Yep. Even transgenderism. Like every topic that they're involved in, it's the same tactic. So I always have to think about, oh, well, okay, so where's this coming from? Where's it? Bloomberg's a great source, because Bloomberg, we know he's fully on board this and he's going to make a lot of money from it. I understand that. But yeah, and then the academics who are academics, I think there's a lot of experts who didn't quite meet their uppance, or they didn't quite get the what would we call it? I wouldn't call it discipline, or I would just call it the.
I would call it. I think I look at my paycheck every week, and I wonder what academics earn, and I'm wondering if they're just jealous and hate the world because they could have done so much better.
They are those who.
Sorry, academics.
Those who can do, those who can't teach. That's the old saying.
there is a place for academics, right? But they need I think a lot of people would agree with me on this. There's the last few years they've let themselves down collectively. There's a few that stick out as holding up the flag of sort of academic integrity, but I think when you look at what's going on, like the things you mentioned, the whole you got the transgender thing, you've got the climate thing. What else? What was one of the other ones you mentioned? Oh, the Ukraine thing.
Refugees.
There's just so many. Yeah. There's so many things, so many topics out there, even cultural, geopolitical, economic, energy things, which they're just so wrong.
Yeah, no.
They're so out of touch. It's unbelievable, and no one's really pulling them up. It's like, I can't talk against old professor mate over there. He's got peer review on his side.
based in this, you just touched on it. Like, based in this is a complete corruption of the academic process, especially the peer review process. For there are little fiefdoms. There are little fiefdoms within academia, in different sciences or different specialities, where people are protecting their own little piece of turf. And one of the biggest thing, this is what I mean, like their comeuppance and these people getting held to account, especially these experts. The most recent one that we have for this, and it played out in real time and very fast, was COVID. We had the experts bringing in the modeling and scaring everyone, and then they're doing this and that. And so much of what they said was not true. But at the time, they were demanding 100% compliance. 100%. And
it's completely unfair on the citizens, because your Joe Bloggs citizen, your truck driver, your engineer, your housewife, your plumber, they just stand around and go, what the hell's going on? Who do I talk to? But they're all, from the top down, they're all in it. There's a few notable exceptions, politically and academically and that, but the vast majority of it, and the media, were all complicit. And I think that's terrible. When there was a really interesting interview, one of the podcast outlets over here in Australia, Discernible, they did a chat a couple of years ago, and they brought out a copy of the Victoria's State pandemic management plan, which was dated, I think, January 2020.
So fresh off the press.
And
let's.
Yeah, it was, but it's hold your judgment for a second, because they said, guess this was written several years ago, and it had lots of stakeholders and submissions, all the rest of it. And it was sort of updated over time, and it had this is pre-COVID. So when you look at what they had pre-COVID, which was meant to be best practice, they chucked it out. So they went through this management plan, and I haven't looked at it myself. So if anyone complains that I've got the numbers wrong, fair call. But the way I remember it was that what did the pandemic management plan say about lockdowns? It said no thanks.
Yeah.
Don't do it. What did it say about masks? It said only for those who are in direct line of fire and possibly sick. So you're talking about doctors and nurses. In the vast majority, not system-wide, right? Not 100% everybody has to wear a mask. So you get all these little tidbits, and all this stuff comes out. And then, of course, there's the whole when you're talking about getting your own vaccination, it's like, well, should I do this or should I not? And you should be allowed to make your own informed decision, which also makes me, in Australia, you've got a thing where I think it's no jab, no pay for kids in childcare. So the problem with the COVID overreaction was it pales, or it reduces the significance of the work that's already been done in the vaccination area. So it's almost like you need to separate the two things and go, no, vaccinations work when they're done according to the protocols and the whole roundup over the last 100 years or whatever it is. The COVID thing's an anomaly, and it should be treated as an anomaly. And we just need to identify it. And on the record, I fully support a Royal Commission the whole way.
Yeah,
federal,
same.
States, companies, everything, whole lot.
Welcome,
get it out there and get
welcome
it done.
aboard. I say this almost every day on my daily rant. I'm like, get it all onto the table. I want to see it all. We've paid for it. We paid dearly for it. Get it all on the table. This is not. And it's not just we have paid. We'll be paying in debt for a generation or more. A long time. We destroy it. Like it needs to be seen. There is no reason to keep this. There's no privacy concerns. There's no reason to keep this hidden. There's no national security risk. There's nothing here. Let's just get it onto the table, because we need to address these problems. It was an outlier. It was a random event.
And exactly. So if we can do this for COVID, and I'd dearly like to see it happen. I'm about sort of 70-30. I don't think it will, just because the powers that be and who's in and all the rest. But I think the climate and energy thing, I think if you went down the track and said Royal Commission on Climate Change, all you'd get at the end of it was a CSIRO report and a PCC report, and they'd go, I don't know. I guess we're in. I think that's all that happened, and this is the sad state of it, right? Because you've got umpteen people writing books, and you've got the Coonans, the Happers, the Willie Soons, the Judith Currys, etc. Even a guy who's he's a bit, I don't know how to take him, right? He's got one thing on some cultural issues, but he's quite good on the climate side. Like, he's a full believer in anthropogenic climate change. But he also calls out when people are using this RCP 8.5, which is the extreme.
It's the most extreme.
It is, and every time you see someone in the media, like particularly Greens, going bloody blah climate change, and then bloody blah this will happen, it's always based on that. Then you can point to this guy who's an actual mathematician and scientific and all the rest of it, who actually points out that, well, actually, these scenarios aren't real, and this is why they came about, and you shouldn't be listening to people who say this stuff. But he doesn't get a voice.
No.
Why isn't he on Q&A? Why isn't he on the ABC, on RN? Why isn't he on...
No debate, man.
Why isn't Carl Stefanovic talking to him on the Today Show every morning?
No debate. And as I was saying, that's my red flag. If someone says, no, we can't debate this, that's a red flag to a bull. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to start looking now. It's like, thank you.
Well, that's what triggered me. That's what triggered me back in 2018. So I'm an electrical engineer. I've been in the power and the gas sector. And I've done, electrical compliance on generators and all this kind of stuff, and worked in power stations. And I didn't give a shit. I'd never even heard of climate change. I was your average Joe Boggs, just doing my job. And until 2018, and it was the Turnbull Morrison, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching the ABC, and it was either Q&A or it was Insight, or one of those programs on SBS. And I saw a girl talk. She was on the panel, and someone in the crowd asked her a question and said, "What are you going to do if solar panels don't work at night?" And me being an electrical engineer, and I'm like, there's no real ambiguity here. It's like, they don't. You need something else. And the next question. She put a bit of spin on it, and I'm like, what? And so I looked it up, and it was the Climate Council or something, and I was naive enough to think that was a government body, and now I found it's a lobby group, and I was now I find out I was red pilled. Have you heard that expression?
Yeah, you were red pilled by the ABC.
So I was red pilled on private. Yeah, I was.
So was I, man. We're in the same club. They red pilled us both.
Oh man! If only they weren't so dumb, we could have still been dumb suckers, and we wouldn't have paid any attention.
But that's I know they do this so, but it's like there are people out there. But you look at the reports. I'm sure you've looked at a couple of them, but reports from the Australia Institute, and you see them come out, and it's like, oh wow, what have we got here? And then you scroll through.
Hang on a second. Sorry, I just had to shake the headphones out there. He said dirty words.
But they come out, and it's just, it's unreal. It's like, do you people have
They've got an agenda though. So
but
when you look at it, so the actual things they write are what do you call it? Hyperbole. They're absolutely exaggerated, and they're worse than that. They take one small window and they exaggerate that and make that the whole story, and they deliberately leave out and obliterate the rest of the story because it doesn't suit the narrative, and actually the rest of the story is actually a much bigger picture. But when you look at the organization, the head of it was married to the Greens, and one was a staffer to the Greens, and this and that, and they're just a green lobby group. That's really all they are. They do this on purpose. That's their purpose in life. It's their MO.
Yeah, I know. 100%. See, this is why I have you on, Benny. This is.
I thought it's just so we could talk about guitar amps.
No, yeah, but see, you understand. You get it. And they do. They're just a lobby group, but it's not even just not reporting the full story. It's the complete transferal of terms. Like they'll change the definitions of words and completely misrepresent what's already there. So, all of a sudden, a tax rebate is a subsidy. Like, how does this happen?
And the safeguard mechanism is increasing competition.
It's lowering price. It's lowering prices and increasing competition. Like, how the fuck do you make this? How does this make sense?
I don't know, man.
But they do, and they'll present it as an academic, report, and it's been done, and then it arrives on hot off the fax machine at the ABC Ultimo office, and they just pick it up and they'll just read the abstract and they'll put it out verbatim, and no one else to criticize.
Do you reckon they send it by the Greens first before they send it to the ABC?
No, WEF.
That'd be cheeky, yeah. Clear it with the UN, the WEF, WHO.
Yeah. Or no, what's the other one?
For release, yeah.
What's the one with the panda on them?
WWF.
Yeah, is it the no? That's the wrestling, isn't it? Yeah. World Wrestling Federation.
That's WWE because the WWF sued them for the name.
Oh fuck, Jesus.
Or for the initials, anyway.
Jeez.
Yeah, that happened years ago. I'm surprised you don't know about that one, Andrew. That was a great one. That was really good.
I don't know that one, but yeah, like that's what they do. Or they'll get a report.
That was around about when the Phoenix Suns told the Townsville Suns they couldn't use the Townsville Suns, so they had to use the Townsville Crocs.
That was a devastating day. It was all downhill for the. It was all downhill for the Suns then.
A bit of local knowledge there, viewers.
Oh, jeez. It's just that manipulation, and then once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And I'm all for like these. I'm all for like, making things better, making them more efficient. I'd love to do that, but you have to be honest, and you have to be honest with words and people, and don't just try to manipulate them. This is it's.
And this is the key, mate. This is the key. So you're hooked on it there. So. The people who are, like you mentioned, the Australia Institute and the Greens and the lobbyists and all the rest of them, and if the key was emissions, reduce emissions at all costs, which is the message we get given every day.
Yeah.
There's no minute of any hour of any day of any week of any year where we're told that this isn't going to happen, and it's going to happen no matter what. They try and sell on the side, it'll be cheaper, but they can't really sell it because it's not cheaper. It's not working that way. The evidence doesn't support it. No. But they say that the emissions have to reduce no matter what. So then you could go, okay, so why don't you like nuclear? And the problem with it is that they send into conniptions about the nuclear because they don't actually care about the emissions so much. It's more about the control of the message. And I've got a sort of a little. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a theory. I'll give him a theory.
Okay.
The theory is that wind and solar obviously have a fairly short life cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
15 to 20 years, depending who you talk to. 25 years maybe, or depending how many wind farm towers fall down in the meantime, or how many solar farms get damaged by hail or storms and whatever. But generally.
Don't forget to divide it by 30. You gotta, because they're only operating 30% of the time, and they only last 20 years.
That's correct. So if I just talk about just how long they last, so you've got to replace all the coal and gas. Okay, let's do it from their perspective. We have to replace all the coal and gas, and it has to be wind and solar. So it's going to take how long to do that? Let's call it 20 years to do that. So in that 20 years time, some will start at day 1 and some will start at day 20. But by the end of 20 years, you're going to have to start replacing stuff. You have to replace your stock because you're consuming your stock now. So after 20 years, your build rates have to include the replacement as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this has no end.
No.
So the transition in capitals and in quotes and trademarked and registered, all the rest of it. A transition implies a beginning state, an end state.
Yeah.
There is no end state with this transition. It's not a transition. It's a continuous build out of renewables. It's continuous.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
This is the plan. This is what they want. And a nuclear power station just ends that, because a nuclear power station is going to be, I reckon within 20 years, they're going to be 100-year builds.
Yeah. They're
going to be there forever, for more than a lifetime of people, right? And if you've got nuclear, you don't need wind and solar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is, from an environmental perspective, this is a whole lot less mines in the ground. It's a whole lot less supply chain. It's a whole lot less construction.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, over 100 years, if you're building one power station instead of 5, which don't even meet the output of the first one. To meet the output of the first one, you've got to build like 3 times the amount, like you mentioned, the capacity factor. So you build 3 or 4 times as much capacity. But over that over that 100 years, you've got to build that 3 times capacity 5 times. So this is the window of opportunity these people and companies see.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's without population growth.
And this is without even, exactly. This is without even meeting the energy needs of China and Africa and the Western civilization. I mean, the balls on these people is incredible. I mean, they're like, we'll just chuck in some emissions reduction and a bit of climate change, a few taxes, and boom, we're set forever.
Yeah, I know.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
And see, what has that got to do with science?
Exactly. It's not, this more science.
We're not
science damages they're called, right?
Yeah, this is
science says
it's not a scientific debate.
Yep. And it's not an environmental debate either. There's nothing environmental about wind and solar. People call them renewables, but the actual equipment's not renewable.
No.
The actual equipment needs mining and coal and oil.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of it. A lot of it. So what?
A big massive truck.
Do you know where I always thought, like, obviously, yeah, because nuclear fixes the problem. And it reminds me a lot of, the other grift industries we've got in society generally. But it's very similar to the pharmaceutical industry, where actually curing someone or curing them of their illness is less lucrative than actually just, helping them deal with the side effects of their illness. And that's so similar, and I always see like nuclear as fixing the problem. That's the solution. That's going to fix the problem. And then you notice, well, okay, yeah, like what you said, then this stops the conveyor belt of, this constant need for solar and winds to be installed. It cuts out the market for that. But then I was also thinking, like, what? You're a reasonably smart guy, and you know what the LGCs would be. Like
large scale generation certificates. They're going about $50 or $60 at the moment, I think. Still, even though we've met our obligations under the renewable energy target and all the rest of it.
That's what Simon was all about. I got a good tweet for you. I called it. I mentioned that earlier on. Anyways. What do you think a nuclear plant would do to those certificates?
Well, you just the problem with like this nuclear is the answer to all. So it's the no emissions. So you get those guys on board if they cared, and you've met all of the synchronous generation requirements as well. We don't have new towns or new massive refining plants opening up in the middle of nowhere, so we don't need all the transmission lines to get the power back in from these remote dispersed renewable sites. So, and you can have the situation where I like to describe the nuclear as every thermal power station needs a hole in the ground somewhere. So every coal-fired power station predominantly has a coal mine right next to it, which feeds its fuel. That's how it works. If you've got to get fuel from somewhere else, you've got a more expensive plant to run. So you sell your power for more. If you have gas, obviously gas pipes come in. You've got a whole bunch of small wells around the place, or maybe an offshore well somewhere, to bring your fuel supply in. If you have nuclear, you have one hole in the ground in Australia, and you don't need any other holes in the ground anywhere.
Yeah,
that's it. You could have one hole in the ground in Australia, one in Canada. Where else do they mine uranium? I can't remember. Probably Russia. In Africa. So you could have you could have 2 or 3 holes in the ground supplying the world's uranium, and you could increase the electricity demand, probably tenfold without having any real impact on the fuel supply. Nuclear plants refuel every 18 months or so they're not exposed to fuel price shocks like coal and gas are and oil, because the instantaneous demand, all that kind of stuff just makes the whole electricity energy problem a really small noise in the background, which it should be. We had this solved 20, 30 years ago.
I know.
And now we've made the problem worse.
Well, that's the thing. So to create this $1 trillion new industry from nothing, they just built this industry out. To create that, they had to destroy something that we had already fixed. We had already solved. We had already made this. We already solved this.
Yep. Yep.
You know, on a small scale, it's like bottled water. It's like, yeah, we already have water in our house. Why are you buying bottled water? Like, we've got this problem solved. Now you're saying it's better for me to drink bottled water, even though you got to make the bottle as well. Yep. Like, I've already got it in the tap.
Back to your pharmacy point, why do you need an obesity pill?
Yeah.
Just eat less and go for a walk.
We've got this solved.
Simplifying it. Sorry, fat people. I apologize to the depths of my heart, but just eat less. You'll be right.
Well, that's.
They're gonna cancel me over that.
I know. It's just sad. It's just sad. Anyways, these people drive me mental. There's a whole. I always just focus just on the grift, just the way that they're able to manipulate like public opinion, and I think you do have a lot of these groups. You said before, like there's the Climate Council, and you think, oh yeah, this is a government agency almost, or this is a truth or an organization guided by truth, and then you just find out no, it's just a scam. It's just a lie. Like why are they allowed to persist like this? If this was a business, the ACCC would be all over them, 100% of the time.
Who pays their salaries and who pays for their reports? And I'm like, it just hurts me deep inside that these people are there, and guarantee not one of them have been to a power station or a mine, or driven a truck or operate a machine of any kind. Probably none of them even dug a hole anywhere.
No.
Probably never planted a tree, and they spend their days trying to wipe out these massively industrial industries. Mm-hmm. Industrial industries, that's a good one. It's not quite alliteration, it's kind of repetition on a...
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? You've got these industries that have... So on mine, you might have 500 or 600 people working there, 99% male, by the way, because it's dangerous and hard work. Not that women can't do dangerous and hard work, but generally they avoid it with good cause, because it's bloody some of it's hard work. Speaking from experience as someone who's worked fly in, fly out for several years, I can vouch for that. It's not for everybody, and you need to have some kind of mental resilience to be able to get through it. And the girls around site were generally pretty good, but they're definitely in the kind of 2 to 5% range in terms of population. Anyway, so you got your mine. You got your guys who go there. How do they get there? Well, they got to fly or bus or all that stuff. So those industries, all of a sudden, they've got a whole lot of extra customers. Who builds the mine? Okay, so you got the construction side of it and the development side, so mines have a lot of equipment, conveyors, machines that need servicing, and they have shutdowns. So then they generally contract a lot of that work out. So you've got these adjacent industries which service the mines. The ripple effect of an industry like this, of a labor-intensive, machine-intensive industry, is enormous. Mm-hmm. And the Teals and their ilk are rushing as fast as they can to shut it down.
Mm-hmm. Without a replacement.
Exactly. They got no concept of what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of them would benefit. And I've said this. I do actually know a guy who, I'll say he owns a coal mine, but he's on the board. Nice bloke, really good guy. And I said to him, maybe you should offer to take, Mr. Pocock and, Zali Stegel and Tylea Finks, whatever her name is, and, Monique Ryan, take them out to a coal mine somewhere and give them an education and show them what it's like, and take them to a big coal-fired power station as well. And just let them see the extent of what's going on there, of what it takes to get that stuff out of the ground. And they might suddenly have a little thing in the back of their head was like, oh, well, how do we close that down?
Yeah.
People need this stuff. They're not doing it to take the coal out and dump it in the sea anywhere.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
Yeah.
It's going to somewhere to make steel. The steel comes back in goods. it's a whole ecosystem, and you can't just shut it down.
Oh well, that's what they're going to try. They're going to try to shut it down without a replacement, and it's just it's the dumbest thing you could ever ask any civilization to do. But they're going to try. I think especially with Pocock and Zali, you know, that I don't think they're really on board with the thinking aspect of their job. They're just there for the.
Well, Mr. Pocock, he had a phrase. I won't repeat it here just in case, but he's like it's not his background. He doesn't know what he's doing. To be honest, he's never been exposed to this stuff. He's an athlete. He was a good footy player. To be honest, he was pretty good. I enjoyed watching him. He was good, but he's really tarnishing his image in my opinion. One of the things that cracks me up or disappoints me, or depending on the day, is he goes on about it's like a biodiversity thing with fisheries and animals, but he's very, very blind to the impacts of Snowy Hydro 2. So one of the things that came out with Snowy Hydro 2 and the environmental impact studies, I think you call it, is the people were worried about when you're joining these waterways together, that the bad fish, some kind of carp.
Carp down.
Yeah, some kind of carp. It's an introduced species, and now it's bad news. So, but the upper waterways are protected from it because they're physically not connected. But with Snowy Hydro 2, if it eventually gets completed, maybe one day, it'll actually join those waterways. And so the problem is that those invasive species will get from this side to that side.
Yeah.
And he's never said anything about it. I've on Twitter, and I've followed him deliberately. I've had the tweets stored up, ready to go, and I've got a notification when he's tweeted something about environmental stuff. I'm like, oh shit, there he goes. Boom, done. Like number one response within a minute. Mr. Pocock, what do you say about this problem with the Snowy Hydro? Nothing. He doesn't say anything. No. So, you know, these guys are just jokers. They don't care.
No,
they're not serious people.
No, they're not. They're not. And, you know, it's just a letdown. Yeah, I just don't know how they function. But then again, you know, they're just playing up to such a small audience. They're playing up to a small.
It is a bubble.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bubble. They don't operate in the realm of, you know, just reality. But this is across the board, even with farming. And you're like, do you understand how much effort it takes to get that food onto your plate every day? And why would you deliberately go out of your way to make it harder for those people? Like, why? That makes you're just going in the opposite way here. This is backwards. This is not progress. This is nothing. You're just making.
So our fundamental inputs into our society. No, I'm talking about physical things, are energy and food.
Yeah.
You get those right, a lot of the other stuff kind of just happens, right? You get the basics right, and you're good to go. A friend of mine who's worked on pretty much every continent except Antarctica. He's been around the traps in the construction industry for a long time. He's an English guy, and he said that Australia is very funny to him because having worked in the Middle East and Africa and Europe and America and the UK and all the rest of it, he says that Australians, there's just nothing to complain about here. Everything's taken care of. It's so easy. That the small things get amplified, so that if there's a murder in Sydney, it's national news, right?
It's a big story.
Someone got shot in Sydney. You're like, holy, okay, and he's like, okay, but it's that amplification of the minor issues because there isn't anything else to talk about.
No.
I think we're fast getting away from that, though. I think we're getting to the point where here in Australia, and you might be able to see it from overseas with your perspective, is that the problems are getting pretty big and they're getting too big to ignore now. We're not able to ignore the reports that keep coming out, even though they've been saying similar things for about the last 10 years, that the electricity industry is in serious trouble. And a lot of that's because of the rooftop solar. Rooftop solar is subsidized into existence. Most people wouldn't have it if they had to pay full price, especially 10 years ago. That's getting I have to acknowledge that they talk about the cost curve has gone down, but I think it might have hit the bottom at the moment. But they're still getting subsidies, right? Even though the cost of the stuff has come down, subsidies still exist. So this drives me insane when you have the state government here in Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria all offering electricity rebates, and every man and his dog gets them, even if they've had solar panels for 10 years and haven't paid a bloody electricity bill properly in a decade. They still get the rebates. So this drives me. This is just pure like vote collection, basically. It drives me nuts. And I don't know why the media is complicit in it. They just rub it off. It's like they're just sort of saturated with it, and they can't sort of see it.
No, they can't. It's this is I mentioned it before. There's it's a nation of grift. Everywhere you look, there is an industry that's been embedded just based on its own, you could call it fear campaign, but its own little set of rules. Like the super industry, for instance. You go into the super industry, it's all rigged. It's just, it's such a waste of money, you know? It's insane. It's good to have savings, that's fine, but we've already got a future fund to do that. You could just set up an account in the future fund, get them to do it. You don't need this huge industry there for that.
Well, the future fund's an interesting conversation, because I didn't know what it was a few years ago.
Okay.
And I looked it up, and then I realized that it's got a couple of different components. But the big one, the one with all the tens of billions in it, I think there's 4 or 5 different subsections, and a couple of them have a couple of billion in them. One's for medical advancement or something. I don't know. It's got 5 or 6 billion. But the big one with the big dollars in it is the Commonwealth Public Sector Superannuation.
Yeah.
So the future fund is just covering a liability of future debt. It's got nothing to do with improving the lives of Australians at all.
No. No, that's what I mean. Like,
it really frightens me, right? I'm just like, okay, well, how about you get every politician and go, okay, here's your super, you get $1 million. If you've been in here 5 years, you get $1 million. Pay it out of this future fund, close it down, and then use it a proper future fund for the good of the country, not just for bloody public sector liability. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's what it was set up for. Public sector liabilities. Anyway,
superannuation.
Going back to what's so frustrating about it, I think Australians generally, as a culture or culturally, we are quite aware through the help of such wonderful people as Tracy Grimshaw. But we are aware that there are scammers out there. There's scammers, and people will call you up and they'll want your bank details, and there's all these scams going on. So we're aware to them, and we instinctively hate them. We just hate them. And when we see these large ones appear, that in these industries where we've given some consent, like the NDIS, for instance, it's like, yeah, sure, we all agree disabled people need some help and blah blah blah. But $60 billion? Like, what's going on here? There's some scams happening in here. Let's investigate.
I'm with you, man. The concept is good. Like, there's no argument from me on the concept of like a body which says, all right, let's make it easier to help the people who are stuck at home or have the disabilities and all that stuff. Lump it all in. Okay, good. But yeah, I mean, Jesus, isn't it the fastest growing?
I know.
Isn't it the fastest growing department?
It doesn't make
Everyone's got ADHD now, so they can get money out of it.
It's like, no, this is not, we're not looking at, okay, you've taken our goodwill to look after the disabled people. You've taken that goodwill, and now you've just created this whole new grift industry. And it moves like that with everything. Yeah. Everything moves along. The Voice. Everyone remember The Voice. That's exactly what that's going to do. It's just moving into position, and it's going to have the same result. And we need, we've all got a pretty good bullshit detector because of Tracy Grimshaw. We've all got a good bullshit detector, and we know, what's happening to the electricity system at the moment. We had this was fixed. We had this sorted. So what's going on? Can we dig into this? And, you do have the blob out there, the media and that are just, they're not interested at all. They're just...
Yeah, Tracy, the Tracy Grimshaw, what was her show? Was it Today Tonight?
A Current Affair. How dare you get that wrong?
A Current Affair, that's it. wrong network, sorry. she had a good thing going there, old Tracy. It was people, from what I understand, people would call up and say, this isn't right, and I haven't got satisfaction from the usual processes. Here's my story. And if they judged it was sensational enough, they'd go and get them on camera. And
Ooh,
there's some classic stories.
They'd chase him down the street too. You know, it's not real.
Yeah.
And it's not real until
But
the
they'd like
ACA cameraman's after you.
If the used car salesman had sold someone a lemon and they caught him running it, and they went to interview him and he ran away, that was the best TV of the week.
That's it.
They were cheering for that, right?
Oh, you get follow-ups from that
no
one
one
too. You get in there with the follow-up.
Oh, yeah.
You go to the
Like-
courthouse and chase him out of the court. You can't, like...
Who was the someone took over me. There's a really interesting one of my favorite internet pieces or TV pieces ever was geez, I can't remember her name. She was a bit younger, but she did a story on the Sydney party guy. I can't remember his name, but he had the glasses, and she told him to take the glasses off, and he said nah. And then she scolded him, and he reacted like a typical teenager, cocky teenager, and just put her in her place. And it was great TV.
Yeah, that was
I'll find the link and I'll send it to you. It's really good.
Corey Worthington. Yeah.
Corey Worthington. Yep.
Yeah.
What was the interviewer's name?
Oh,
She married the guy from
that's
Channel 9.
That's pushing it, man. That's pushing. I got limited knowledge on that.
Admit it.
Um,
But that's kind of that situation. Like, that's interesting that came up, because the people, like, if the media did ask the whole climate blob, like you've described them, the green climate blob, what are they doing? They would be Corey Worthington. They'd be like, get out of my face, I don't care.
Yeah,
Shut up.
exactly. That's the.
You can't talk to me like that.
I know. That's the entire attitude that they have, and it's like, no, you're fucking with people's lives here. You're destroying businesses. People have some serious questions. You're asking to transition to some new green utopia, but you don't want to delve into the detail. Like, I think the detail is important here. We need to have a look at that. And the lack, like, Australians can pick bullshit out from a mile away. But the lack of interest around this in particular is, once it sets alarm bells ringing. There's some important questions and some serious. At the end, at this point, people have voted for this. Come the middle of next year, there's going to be a gas shortage and the power's going to switch off, and then people are going to go blaming coal, or they'll blame Putin or something like that. And it's been coming. There've been the warnings, there's been the reports, and blah blah. And then at that point, I guess people have to get to rock bottom before they start looking around. Like, that's...
I saw a talk by a UK guy called Benny Pizer. I think he runs Net Zero Watch or Global Warming Policy Foundation. And I like to catch, like, I went to, just to balance out my credentials, I should say, I went to the Greens energy policy launch in Brisbane here. It was over at University of Queensland at St Lucia back in, I think, before the 2019 federal election, I think it was. And I like to go to these things and just see what the people say. I don't want to say the crazies, because they're not all crazy. Some of them are quite calculated in their silliness. So I went to...
They're organised clowns, really.
They are. They're doing it on purpose. It's the desired effect is what they have. So I saw Benny Pizer, and the thrust of his talk was that there's a hierarchy of fear with people and how they will think about things when they're thinking about energy. Well, if their fear of the risks of climate change trumps the costs of doing something about it in bracket quotes, they will vote with the climate change side. But once the fear of the lights going out, freezing to death, not cooking their dinner, not getting to work, etc., is more than the risks of some ethereal climate change in the future, that's when the transition is over. It's done. Wasn't there some vote in the last couple of days in Germany somewhere where
Well,
they had to vote for net zero and resoundingly said, yeah, nah.
yeah, and that was in Berlin too. So Berlin, out of Berlin's the biggest city in Germany, but it's also the most despised. It's not despised actually. It's just avoided because it's basically the Melbourne. It's the Melbourne of Germany, and it's
It's too smug for its own good.
it's feral, man. There's some cool things there, but number one, don't go there in winter. Last time I was there in winter. It's just a feral place. It's just feral. There's lots of lefties. There's lots of Antifa is still hobbling around there. It's destroyed. Everything is graffitied. There's just shit and there's dead rats in the street. It's just not a nice place. But it's about as lefty as you can get, as I've just described. Shit everywhere. It's going to be as lefty as you can imagine. And
it sounds like Dave Rubin's descriptions of San Francisco.
It's exactly the same. This is a formula. You cannot muck this formula up. If you have the same elements, and you apply it to any civilization, you're going to get the same result. It's unfallible. It cannot fail. But they had a vote, a referendum almost in the city, because Berlin also operates as a state, so it's much like ACT. So they had a referendum to bring in net zero by 2030, and they didn't even reach quorum. They didn't even reach.
Who was bringing this vote to the people? Was it a public referendum? Was it an online vote?
It was public.
How was it enacted?
Yeah, it was public. It was going through the state of I think it's the state of Brandenburg is Berlin, Brandenburg, something like that. It was through their state, and it was by the Greens. Here, a lot of the effort is. This is basically like the ground zero for the entire green enviro movement, and that goes back to the early 19th century and the naturalist movement and things like that. But the way that they've been able to manipulate it now is that these things are done without any debate at all. So, for instance, Germany's a large car manufacturer, and they brought in, they're trying at the moment actually to bring in a ban on internal combustion engines by 2035. If you ask anyone in the street, they'll say, no, that's a bad idea. But it gets pushed through anyway. So it goes through like committees and then to tabled, and then they get reports in, and they build up.
Sounds familiar.
Exactly. It's a process. This process is applied universally. So that's what they thought they could do with this net zero one in Berlin, is just push it through. But what they didn't realize is that the supporters in Berlin are such fucking retards that they're not going to go vote. They're too lazy. It's not compulsory. If they're
too stoned.
Yeah, exactly. This is Berlin you're talking about. So they thought that they could just push it through the normal blob, through the back door, and that it would have this automatic consensus, because no one can disagree. You can't possibly disagree, otherwise you're a racist. And so it still failed. But Berlin's a lost case anyways. Berlin's a lost cause. It's not don't ever go to Berlin unless you're into humiliating yourself and losing money. Then go there.
There's definite forums for that. You can sign up, I think. Self-flagellation.
I follow
pay for it. You're not giving it a good sell, Andrew. I don't think I'll.
No one should go to Berlin. No one should go to Berlin. It should have just been, instead of war reparations to Poland, they should have just given them Berlin and just said, "Look, take it. We don't want it." There's nothing there. It's nothing. It's not a nice place. It's really not a nice place at all. And no.
It's interesting the formula you talked about there with the committees and the bureaucrats, the bureaucracy, the swamp, if you like.
Yeah.
Just seems to run the joint. So I over here in Australia, to a thing and you can meet a politician, you can talk to them, you send them an email or whatever, and some of the comments you get in the sort of in the chat after a couple of beers, which is I don't know how many places you still get to do that around the world. I think it's a really good thing where your senator or your MP will go to an event and hang around afterwards and have some beers, right? Just completely off the cuff, unscripted. And some of them, to be fair, some of them are pretty shit. They don't want to give you the answers or talk to you much.
Each year,
but, there's a few who are happy to talk and shoot shit and have a bit of fun. But one guy I was talking to a couple of years ago said that as a new senator, before he hadn't even gone to Canberra yet, before he was getting lobbyists chasing him up. And when he went to Canberra, he had lobbyists in the hallway waiting for him at his office. They knew where his office was before he did.
Yeah.
So it gives you some idea of the connections and the power of the swamp and the people who are, running it, I guess.
Exactly.
They can they've got a lot of power, and they're imbued with this power, and I think over the last 10 years or so they've just realized that they can use it. So you get the right politician who's willing to let them do it, and they sort of give them these vague directions and policy, and then all of a sudden you get incentives for this and tax breaks on that, and you get some
that's the thing I've
subsidies
mentioned
for this, and
that's the thing I mentioned with the World Economic Forum as well, is that it's highly unremarkable, but all these people go there and gather, and they all agree, all of them. Not one of them disagrees at all on any of the topics. They all
is Davos you're talking about?
Yeah, they all agree 100%. And anytime, there's an old adage that people say is that, you should really be worried when all the politicians agree on something. That's when you're being fucked. When all the politicians agree on the same thing, that's when you should be worried. And it's very similar. Like, it happens here. It happens in England, in UK, for instance. Like, how did the Conservative Party there become so green? Like, there's a perfect example of how they do it and how it's done, but it's not democratic. It's not accepted by the people. It's just being forced through, and with catastrophic circumstances. But yeah, I think in the last couple of years they have started wielding their power. They've started wielding a lot, and especially after Trump. I think Trump was that was just the kick to the hornet's nest. It was just like, okay, I got elected. The first thing I'm doing is I'm pulling out of the Paris Agreement, and that was just.
I think
that's chaos.
Yeah, I think no matter what your stance on the political parties in America, excuse me, the specter of a Trump second term is just like, break out the popcorn.
Dude.
This is going to be epic.
Like
people can say what they like about him, but to be honest, the Abraham Accords, the war, the economy, Kim Jong-un, no wars. He dropped a Moab on someone and he killed a couple of terrorists, but just the numbers speak to getting the basics right, which I'm a big fan of, getting the basics right, and that's what I think. And Trump in his personal life, whatever, I don't give a shit. If you don't need to be a good person to run a country. And I think it might even be the opposite. I think you might need to be an absolute asshole to be able to run a country and a swamp effectively. Yeah. I think if you're going there thinking you're going to be a nice guy and make people happy, they're just gonna screw you over, man. They're gonna, oh, look at this chump.
Exactly.
They'll be rubbing their hands like this.
Yeah.
Yep. But if you get someone like, have you been following Vivek Ramaswamy?
A little bit, Twitter? Yeah. I like his stuff. I really like his opinions and the angles he's going.
He's no chance for the presidency, I don't think. But I'd love to see him on the debate stage. And I reckon, wouldn't it be an interesting world if you had like a Trump president and Vivek vice president?
Yeah.
That'd be a hell of a thing. I mean, just he's talking about using the American military to take over take on the cartels, the drug cartels, finish the wall, take out the cartels, get out of the climate craziness, build a whole bunch of nuclear plants to ensure energy security. Don't take any shit from China. You know, some of that stuff might backfire. I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what. It's so refreshing to see someone talking about their country and trying to improve it.
Yes.
Than what we get the rest of the time. Like, I mean, look at Biden and his Afghanistan. Look at Biden trying to get out of an airplane.
Oh no, I know.
Jesus.
But it's true. Like
But look at Australian politicians.
No, yeah, they're bending over backwards to fuck themselves. Like they're bending over backwards to screw the people. Like no one's actually there trying to. Perfect example. Okay, so me with I have an economics background, but from a weapons point or a point of trying to push foreign relations in the direction you like, in regards to Russia invading the Ukraine, if you really want to attack Russia or hurt Russia, Australia's best option there is to produce as much as possible, because in basically all of our exports, Russia is one of our competitors. So that could be iron ore, bauxite, whatever else we need.
Gas,
coal,
oil,
gas,
coal,
even down to wheat and barley and agricultural aspects.
Gold,
yeah,
uranium.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are a massive competitor to them, almost identical with commodities. And the way that we would do that, if we had a functioning government who were interested, they could say, okay, well, we could benefit from this. We could increase our production. We could open up these new areas, employ more people, and we can open up new markets, new suppliers here. And we can push that and run, this could be a net gain for our country. Instead, they're like, oh, let's bend over backwards. Let's send a bunch of cash over there. We'll limit the gas supply, because that will get them. We'll boost. Yeah. That's the Australia Institute.
We'll just cut off.
The Australia Institute's like,
cut off the,
we could be taking more money from these super profits, and at the same time, we should be shutting down gas. And it's like, which one do you want?
It is. It's the Greens. The Greens' policy is to tax everything, shut everything down, and make everything free. That's kind of where they come from, right? It's all got to be government based. But it's interesting. I quite like the argument where more supply means lower costs, because it destroys the renewable lobby's arguments in several ways. The problem with the more supply lowers costs is that renewables are not a proper form of supply, because they're intermittent and you can't rely on them. So then you have to pay something else to rely on it, and when you pay something else to make it reliable, that sets the price. And we're talking about the wholesale price. More supply of renewables means a whole lot more transmission lines and infrastructure, which also adds costs. So that doesn't help them either. And the other thing is that we've been throwing money at subsidies to get more renewables in the system, and for some of those other reasons I've stated, the cost just isn't coming down. It's just not, and it's not gonna.
It's not designed to.
They're gonna keep. Well, it kind of can't. I'm lucky enough to have got a few pieces published in the Spectator online, the Australian one, and one of the pieces I did recently was about the unlikeliness of renewables being able to reduce retail bills. Now, when you challenge people about renewables and the costs of them, they go, "Oh, look at that, the price in South Australia. Look at the negative prices." And you go, "Okay, so you look at the wholesale price. Well, that's about 30 to 35% of the total cost. Now let's talk about the other 70%, which is your retail and your transmission and distribution costs." And you go, "So, which one of those which part of that 70% of your bill do renewables reduce?" And the answer is zero. The answer is that of all those costs, of all the rest of that 70%, renewables actually makes them cost more. So you get to the point now where these thousands of kilometers of transmission, I think Albo and Bowen went to the election saying they needed 10,000 kilometers of transmission. I think they've got a few more on the books now.
It's more than that.
So,
it's like 18,000 kilometers or something.
It's
fucking mental,
some
man.
ridiculous number, man. It is mental. And when you look at the average cost of it, it's quite frightening too. So they've committed $20 billion of public spending, and when you look at the AER's, the Australian Energy Regulator's annual State of the Energy Market reports, they value the entire existing high voltage transmission system at about 21 billion. So that adds a certain percentage of cost, right? So it's they get an 8% regulated return, 7 to 8% guaranteed, and that 8% is based on, in simple terms, how many kilometers of transmission line they have and how many transformers, etc., and substations. So it's based on the actual equipment. It's not on utilization or anything else. So if you double the size of the equipment, you double the cost.
Yeah.
You double the return they're able to make. So the transmission companies and all their enablers and the people who benefit from more transmission are all like, hey, the transmission's great. We should have more of it. Stop talking about it. We just need more transmission lines. Just because they're on board, they want to get in the bubble, right? They get in the bubble and get the transmission built. You get your return, and in 10 years' time, the CEO retires with a big fat paycheck and a private plane to Davos. I don't know, something like that. So you get all these. Definitely vested interests having transmission line companies tell as submissions to how much transmission should be built. When you get a regulated return, I don't think you should be allowed to comment at all. You should be told what the result is by a fair and independent cost-benefit analysis. And if it says you get no more transmission, well, soup Nazi, transmission Nazi, no soup for you, because we don't need it.
Yeah.
But that's not happening. That's not happening at all.
Yeah.
So what we're going to see is more higher electricity costs in Australia. And the other part that's forcing higher electricity costs is the Greens and their policy and their enablers and their sycophants, which is also, I call it the lobby groups and the media and academia, all these people who jump in and toe the line and actively support them and distort the message, like with Ukraine is pushing the gas prices up. Well, actually, America's paying about $3 Australian per gigajoule right now. $3 to $5 Australian. We're paying about 10. So I don't know what that's got to do with Ukraine. It's the more they restrict development of gas, of supply, the demand is going to go up because of whether it's overseas or local, and because the supplies of gas are diminishing in the southern states out of Bass Strait. And they talk about cancelling people's gas stoves. Well, I'll tell you what, people need a bit more than a few gas stoves cut off to fill the gap for this gas that's going to be missing. We've got real issues in this country that you touched on before, and the enablers are bugging me. They're really hurting this country. It's a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how we're going to fix it. No one seems prepared to vote them out.
Yeah, and it's not even a matter of voting them out. They just need to be dragged. It's because they've hidden this whole time behind no debate, no talk, no rational discussion. All it needs to do, you need to drag the debate into the public. It has to be dragged through. And unfortunately, I think the only time that's going to happen is when the blackouts begin. And I shouldn't say begin, because they've already begun in some parts, but yeah, that's just a mess. It's just such a shame, because it's unneeded, it's uncalled for. We don't need to be in this situation. That's the worst thing about it, and we're just pushed into the situation by just grifters.
Well,
it's
in Germany. You've got
scam.
I keep reading about in Germany how they've reduced gas consumption, and some of the people are quite proud of that, and I think it's horrific when you think about the industries that are closed down and the people that are on energy rations. It's like,
that's what they said. They were cheering themselves.
Germany's not at war. Ukraine's at war. Germany's not, but Germany's on gas rations. I mean, gee whiz, that's hard to take.
They were cheering themselves, like they were patting them. This goes back. They've been patting themselves on the back non-stop, but they were cheering themselves when they said, Germany's going to be net zero by 2035 or 2050 or whatever it was. Germany's going to be net zero. At the time, I was like, yeah, well, why do you need Nord Stream? Like, why are you building Nord Stream if you're going to be net zero? And, behind that was never the thing that, we're going to be net zero by we're going to pay a lot here. We're going to pay a lot there in certificates and blah, 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 dodgy accounting tricks. But then when the gas crisis actually happened, just winter just been, they started saying, oh, yeah, well, we've cut demands to gas now. And they started patting themselves on the back again. And so you're driving, you've shut down industries, you've shut down factories.
They nationalised the gas company as well, didn't they?
Yeah, Uniper, that was the big one. They got Uniper, which was nationalised. And it's like
because Uniper couldn't afford to buy the gas to meet its customers. So the German government said,
it couldn't to meet its contracts. And a lot of these companies have just decided, especially BASF, who are a large chemical company, and they've just moved. They said, no, we're not investing any more in Germany. We're moving everything to America. You know why? Because, as you said before, America's paying like $3 for a joule of gas. They're paying nothing there, so they're like, we need this gas to make chemicals to make our world operate. We kind of need these things. These are things that we kind of
even locally. I mean, a company here called Brickworks. I think it's an Australian company, and I think it's the largest bricks manufacturer in the Southern Hemisphere. I could be wrong, but they find it cheaper to make bricks in America, even though the rest of the materials cost more. I believe their gas price is their fuel gas is the highest for their furnaces. Good luck baking bricks in an electric furnace. But you've got this gas furnaces, which their fuel cost is a high proportion of their overhead. And so they'd rather move to America, open new factories in America and ship the bricks over it.
Yeah, and that's
the story, right? That's what's happening everywhere.
That's the transition. That's what the transition is.
Yep.
We're going to move.
And back to what you said before. About supply demand and just make it here. Well, if we oversupplied our LNG terminals, and so there's a whole debate about how that happened and whether we should have had a domestic reserve and all that stuff, but the horse is bolted on that because you got long-term contracts, and I can't see any politician having the balls to break into them, because I think the Japanese and Korean and Chinese politicians are a bit smarter and a bit tougher than the Australian ones, to be honest. So I think partly because they might have some family, under threat somewhere, who knows? But particularly the Chinese ones. But the case where you have if you had a lot more gas supply in Australia, and that was surplus to the requirements of the LNG plants, and you couldn't sell it on the spot market, they would just dump it in the local market as cheap as possible. Yeah. Just to get rid of it, because you can't just start these things up and then shut them down and start them up and shut them down. You've got to keep them going. So all the dips in demand from overseas and the low prices from overseas would result in low cost gas here, and that would be sensational for us. Economically. It'd be amazing. It'd be cheap power. It'd be industries would spring up which would go, hey, let's use the gas. You know what? I don't see any industry springing up to use this free power from renewables like people keep saying it's gonna.
None.
You need hydrogen, apparently. Hydrogen, and that needs a whole lot of subsidies as well. It's
hydrogen's the biggest scam of them all that I've seen. It's there.
It's a big white elephant. It's worse than desalination plants.
Oh, Jesus Christ, don't even get me. That will be the next step. It will be hydrogen-powered desalination plants run by transgender people. That will be the next one. It's coming, man. You need
desal for the... you need at least drinking quality water for the electrolyzers. And so you need... They have such a large water throughput that you need to put them on the coast. Because obviously, someone would get in trouble for taking over a whole lot of agricultural land and using all their drinking water, wouldn't they? Tapping the Great Artesian Basin to make hydrogen. So I describe this as green hydrogen, which is running electricity through water using a membrane and an electrolyzer, turning it into hydrogen and exporting it. I describe that as exporting our drinking water overseas, because that's really what it would happen. That's what that is. There's no getting around it.
No, it's a very expensive way to do the most simple of things anyways. It's just It's just it's a mess. It's a mess, man. If you could do one thing to if they said Benny, look mate, you can do one thing to the energy market to fix our problems, what would it be?
So many.
One,
It's like
I
having
know,
the,
there's a
the
lot.
genie with the lamp, right?
There's a lot, isn't there? You can only do one.
I think I'd and this might sound a bit tech speak to people, but I'd limit the semi-scheduled generator. If I had one thing to do, if I had several, this one would be a little bit down the list. But if I only had one, in the national electricity market, which is the east coast of Australia and South Australia and Tasmania, you have generators, right? And you have the big all the way through from coal, gas, hydro. You got some diesel ones. That South Australia had to spend $500 million on diesel generators to keep the lights on one year.
It's the Collins class of grids. South Australia is the Collins class of grids. It's just diesel generator running battery backup. That's it.
So you got everything from coal, gas, hydro, diesel, batteries, wind, solar, biomass, you name it, whatever it is. So they're all in there now. Some of them have different capabilities to others, and some of them are bigger, and some of them are smaller. So the way the grid is, the generators are organised. They call them participants. So the participants are organised into three categories. You've got non-scheduled. So scheduled means they're given a megawatt set point from the central dispatch by the Australian Energy Market Operator, which is to maintain the frequency. So they don't, the unscheduled or non-scheduled don't connect to AEMO in that sense. Semi-scheduled is your intermittent wind and solar farms, and these are the ones that are over 30 megawatts. So if you're below 30 megawatts, typically you're not scheduled. They don't care. No, there's no point. You have no effect on anything. Over 30 megawatts, you're getting into the wind and solar farms. And then you have the scheduled, the fully scheduled units, which is your coal, gas, diesel, hydro, etc. Because they can ramp up and down at direction, irrespective of what the weather's doing. Whereas your wind and solar can only ramp down unless they've already been told to ramp down. And if there's enough wind or solar, then they can ramp back up again to where they were. But their output is dictated by the weather, which sounds obvious, but some people need it spelled out. So what I would do is my one thing, which I think would level the playing field completely, I would say, all right, you got 5 years. Semi-scheduled is capped at 30 megawatts. So if you have a 100 megawatt solar farm or a 100 megawatt wind farm or whatever, you got 5 years to either make it non-scheduled, which is reduce its capacity down to 30 megawatts, or enter into some kind of agreement with a scheduled generator, so that you can then make yourself scheduled by buying power from them when you need to make up your set point, or you install some kind of infrastructure to make yourself scheduled, whether that be battery or a gas turbine or a diesel generator, whatever. That's the one thing. If I had one thing to do, I would do that. I would delete the semi-scheduled category in the national electricity market.
Yeah, and you think like that's the most destructive aspect.
It allows the most grift. It really does. There's a whole discussion around there around people whether electricity is a commodity or a service. It's kind of both, but it's more one than the other. And it's when you think about how our society's evolved, not just alongside electricity and availability of electricity and energy, but because of it. If you think of space heating, air conditioners, living in cold climates, say Canada or Northern Europe, growing food with fertilizer. If you think about air conditioners or lights or cooking, vacuum cleaners, internet, refrigeration, clean water, all those things are kind of fundamental to a functioning society, not just nice to have. Then you kind of can't go past having electricity on all the time. Therefore, it's not really a commodity because it can't really be stockpiled. You can't choose to do without it. You need the electricity and the energy, just like you need the clean water, just like you need the police and the fireys and hospitals and things. So it's in that sort of category for me. There's also a big debate around whether it should be privatized or nationalized or some combination of both. So I think there's a lot of right answers. It's just that we haven't hit any of them yet. We're not kicking any goals here. We haven't found the right answer yet. But there's a lot of people. I talk to some people who are thinking very hard in that area, trying to define that. They're quite critical of they calls it the what does he call it? Something about the 90s, how we're a bit the naive 90s, coming out of the Cold War. And Reagan and all that stuff in the 90s, and everything was chipper and free markets, the golden goose. But I think to temper that side of things, which is critical of the free market running riot, I also think that in something like our electricity market in Australia, it hasn't really been given a chance to run its course. So all but one or two of the coal-fired generators in the national electricity market were built before the market actually existed, which came into effect in around about 98 to 2000, in that sort of area, as interconnectors and all that stuff happened. So and then not long after that, John Howard put in the renewable energy target, which has been distorted and manipulated over the years. So we're at the point where we could have had a good run of clean, mostly market-based policies and systems in place running our electricity markets, but they were never given a chance to see if they could fulfill their goals and replace the generators. Because what's the purpose of a market? This comes down to this as well. So what is the purpose of a market? Well, one, in electricity, it has to keep the lights on, so it has to keep the frequency at 50 hertz. And that's the fundamental point of it, to instantaneous balance up and down. But it also has to pay for the infrastructure. And if the infrastructure, like we're talking about, is going to keep going up and up and up, which is the transmission lines, and they're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of individual wind and solar farms and batteries to replace, 20 or 30 coal-fired power stations and a couple of gas plants, then that's hideously complicated, and it's going to be very expensive. And it also is mostly weather dependent. So we're getting to the point where this is starting to become real to people. As you mentioned, blackouts are being mentioned more and more. Now, it's also true that most blackouts are caused by the poles and wires, fires, accidents, equipment failure, that sort of thing happens. But I think it was Australia Day in 2019 in Melbourne, and this is pretty juicy, this one. So it was a hot day. You had some of the Victorian coal-fired plants were derated. I think there was some tube leaks somewhere, and they were running a bit below their peak output. And then you have another one had I was on planned maintenance, so there was another one which was one unit was off completely, and it was a pretty hot day. It was Australia Day. It was pretty busy, and then the wind dropped. What do you know? They had rolling blackouts. And the CEO of the market operator, who at the time was Audrey Zibelman, a New Yorker, and she was brought in by Malcolm Turnbull, I think, in that era anyway. And she was actually interviewed on the 7:30 report, and the transcript's still available. It's great. And she said, well, if the wind hadn't dropped, it would have been okay.
That damn wind.
Who runs something as critical, like we talked about before, clean water and FPOS machines?
On wind.
If I'm a barista, the most important thing in my day are the coffee machine, the FPOS machine, and the air conditioning. Right? You could do without the lights for a couple of hours, but you need that bloody FPOS machine going. If it's not working, you're not working, and you're sitting around going, "Should I just lock the door and go home?" Well, shit, I caught a train. How do I get home? Shit. Who do I call? Oh, I can't. The towers are off. This is all of a sudden things. When you lose those fundamentals, the society has real problems. So imagine if when you have floods or fires, one of the main concerns is the water system, the clean water system.
Yeah.
So if you have widespread blackouts and you don't have any clean water, you can just picture what's going to happen around the place. You'll have plenty of toilet paper on the shelves, but there won't be any bottled water, and pretty soon there won't be anything with liquid in it.
Yeah.
it's just doesn't bear thinking about.
I know.
And I don't know how people can play games with this stuff. This needs to be sorted out. And I actually firmly believe we're sort of at the bottom of a 30-year mountain we need to climb now. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, if you had aliens come in and body snatch all the leading politicians and everyone and swap them out with sensible people who had to fix it, and they had to do it legally and play within the rules, you've still got all these things in the network that have these long-term contracts. So you can't just turn them off. If you wanted to turn them off, you'd have to pay them out for the next 15, 20 years or so. And that's not cheap.
No.
And I don't know if you could even do it. Sometimes you actually need those bloody wind and solar plants running to keep the lights on. As interesting as that is, because we just don't have the spare capacity. I think they need to make nuclear available, which means get rid of the bans and actually start looking at it. I've said to a few people, one of the obvious things they could do is make the if there's a retiring power station, a coal-fired power station, because they're pretty big sites. And obviously they have water, they've got roads and rail. Quite often they've got a big substation as well to get the electricity out, and they're already connected to the network. Yeah, so why don't they just go, okay, so I'm the energy minister of, say, Victoria. I'm Lily D'Ambrosio. I identify as Lily today. You could, sorry, Lily. You could go to Energy Australia, who runs Loy Yang, or whoever it is, your lawn maybe. And so we're already subsidising you out till 2028 with our secret payments. Otherwise, you would have shut down already. How about what's your environmental rehabilitation cost when you close it down? And Energy Australia might go, yeah, it's $100 million or $200 million or something like that. And as Lily, empowered as I am by the voters of the state to do the best thing, and fully in control of the swamp creatures that are my bureaucracy, I might say, okay, well, here's some rules, some regulations or something, or an act that I've had passed, which says that I will forgive you your rehabilitation cost. Here's $1, and you hand the site to me at the end of that time. So that looks very, very good on the balance sheet of the company that does not now have to fork out $200 million in rehabilitation, right? Yeah. So it goes, thanks for that. Deal. And we'll forgive you everything. Done. Just pack up, give us the keys and walk away. Okay. Then what the government would do would be demolish that power station. Okay. And then greenfield the site, but leave in place the water, the electricity, the roads and the rail, and then offer that to a nuclear developer. And that is the subsidy, which is the demolition cost plus some paperwork.
Yeah.
And I think if they did that, the paperwork side of it, the approvals, the environmental stuff, all that bullshit, most of that just goes away. And that is a major incentive for a developer of a new power station. If it was allowed to develop it, they might go, okay. But then that's that one side. But on the other side, you've still got the problem where the subsidies on the solar and on the rooftop solar in particular are eating into the market share of a baseload generator like a nuclear power plant. So then they would also need a long-term power purchase agreement, probably for 30 years or more, 30 to 50 years at a fixed price, or some kind of escalation maybe, but it'd be there, it'd be locked in, and that would need to be in place as well. So this is why I think we're in a very, very tight position in Australia, because our electricity grid is long and stringy and strung out, but it's also not very high capacity. We're 25 million people, and we're apart from hydrogen, we're trying to shut down industries. We're not interested in growing industries, right? We're trying to get rid of cows in this country, for God's sake. So the problem is many layered, and it's not getting any easier. So I think even if the aliens came down and substituted out the idiots with some sane alien brains, they'd find it very difficult to get anything sensible done.
Yeah, I think that's like a winning. That's people discuss a lot about the troubles, like especially the Liberal Party has and the Nationals have in like a national scale, it's because of the ideas. You know, at the moment they're trying to push ideas that are not theirs. So they're playing on someone else's field, trying to learn the language of these people, hoping that their supporters will start supporting you. That doesn't work like that. You have to be up with your own ideas that you know that your supporters will follow and they agree with, because they are your salespeople. And nuclear is just one of those ones they could jump on. That's there. You know, it's easy to grasp. Yeah. It's an easy concept. It's like, okay, we can do this. We can actually provide electricity on a full-time basis. And
it's so easy to say.
It is.
In opposition, it's so easy to say. You can't even do it. You can't even change the law. You can just say, when we get in, we'll change the law.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, done. I know. It's something so simple, and it just fixes. Yeah, see, and I asked like what you would do to fix it. I would even go, I would just, as a Queenslander, I would just cut the interconnector. That's it. I wouldn't cut it.
That happens from time to time in real life, you know.
I wouldn't cut it.
No, it doesn't get
until the prices in New South Wales are through the roof, and then I would turn it on.
See, I think it's interesting you raised interconnectors, because I think is one of the keys to any kind of, if they have market reforms, which need to go back to making sure each state, because the interconnectors are fairly small capacity compared to the state's actual demand, right? You can't feed New South Wales from Queensland. You just can't build a 13 gigawatts interconnector to get you down there. That's ridiculous. You could do it in China, where you have, Sydney might be a small regional town of 15 million people.
A provincial outpost.
You can put a 500 kilometer interconnector into feeding 15 million people electricity, and you could make it worthwhile. But not bloody New South Wales. But I think the market, if there's a big rejig of the market reforms, I think they need to take that into account and say, okay, the cost to operate that interconnector is this. Here's the fixed price for that interconnector. If it's got a regulated return, it's going to have a regulated price, and that therefore, or the only other thing you could say is, well, if it wants to be competitive, then they're allowed to lower the price to get more sales through it, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But in each region, it's trickier than that. I mean, that's a really basic take, because there's a lot of factors that go into setting the wholesale price, and like we talked about before, the wholesale price is only of your average bill is only like 30 to 35%, and probably going down, to be honest. If you look at what the drivers are of the wholesale price, you're looking at the price setters, which is the last generator and the most expensive generator required to keep the power balance, and they start with the cheapest and go up. And so, of course, your wind and solar bid negative and $0, and so do a lot of coal and gas generators bid $0 and -$. But a 500 megawatt coal-fired power station unit might dedicate 300 megawatts to 0 or to minus 900, so that 300 megawatts is always dispatched no matter what the price is. And then they might split up the next slot, and they might save a bit in reserve, which is across the top, which might be for $2,000 or $3,000 a megawatt hour. And then they can say, oh, if you want it, you can pay for it, but if you want it, we got to get some extra fuel in and bits and pieces. So all those things feed into how that works. Now, one of the interesting things about New South Wales is that they've got these 5 big coal-fired power stations, and they're just about to shut down Liddell, which has been ramping down for a bit now, and it's on its last legs. It'll be shut off in a couple of weeks. But you've got the case where you've got 4 left, and Matt Keane, New South Wales' outgoing Treasurer and Energy Minister, he did a last minute gazette, a rule change, which if I'm correct, it was on the 23rd or the 24th of December at 4:30 in the afternoon. It was a Friday.
Wow.
And this was the coal reserve and the price cap. That's when it came out. you couldn't make it up. So he actually reserved coal for domestic use from exporting mines. So these mines, so you got to say, well, how does a mine get its product to market? Well, it sticks it on a railway line, and where does the railway line go? It goes to the port. It doesn't always go past a power station. So you got these mines which have to reserve coal at short notice, not sell it overseas, and with the expectation that they're going to get it to a mine, to a power station somehow, which is they're not connected to by rail. I mean, give me a break. This is swamp creatures gone wrong. It's some kind of nightmare.
It's terrible, man. And I think like that's the basis of a lot of this, you know, it's just like swamp creatures, you know, these bureaucrats and then you have state and then federal level bureaucrats getting in there with their you know, all trying to make their own little case for their own future, and it's that's an issue. That's a big issue. How are you supposed to negotiate? Yeah, I just don't get it. I would cut, as a Queenslander, I would cut Queensland off from the rest of the country, and I would just say, you motherfuckers do what you want. We're gonna do everything. We're gonna provide gas, coal, food, everything we need, water. That's gonna be fine. If you guys need help, we're here. We're here for assistance at a fee. You know?
Yeah. What?
If you need some more electricity,
that's a fair point, actually.
We'll give you the electricity, but it's going to come at a cost. You got to pay our carbon bill for it, and then you got to pay this and this and this, and then let their own electorate deal with that. You know, let them come up.
But if you had a bunch of swamp creatures prepared to cut the interconnector, I also don't think you need to worry about the carbon bill. I think that'd be gone first.
Yeah, exactly. Because they don't know. We're like, people they're not gonna be shaken up until something happens, until something, you know, it confronts them. South Australia is
this gets back to that's exactly right. This gets back to the fear question. So when we started talking tonight, I'd started talking about Craig Rucastle and his War on Waste, and we started off talking about recycling. But about a year after, maybe 2 years after that, he did something related to emissions. And it was, I mean, if War on Waste was a 10, this one was a 1. It was really bad. It was so one-sided, and it hit all the same old talking points, and it was just the same old blurb that you hear, and it's nothing interesting. Most of it's misinformation, and it's pure propaganda designed to tell one side of the story, and not just tell one side of the story, but to bury the other side. Yeah. Actively bury it and talk about it in negative terms, right? So I had a couple of, I said to him on Twitter, in polite terms, you know me, I'm usually pretty restrained on the twits, but I said to him, well, I don't think you got this right, mate. This is what you said there was wrong, and blocked me. And this is the conversation that's happening, or the not conversation. So you got, I think someone else I was watching, Scott Adams. He said that there's 2 conversations going on. We're both presented with the same screen.
Yeah, there's 2 movies. Yeah.
One. Yeah, that's right. But you see two different movies, even though you're watching the same TV, and that's exactly what's happening.
It is. I think Rucastle. I don't know. I don't think he's blocked me. I think he. Yeah, no. I think I got close once because he was saying how EVs shouldn't be taxed. They shouldn't pay the road users tax. And I said, well, why would that be? And he says, oh, because, you know, the externalities are not factored in, you know, and there's no externalities. And I said, well, actually, no, here in the in the fuel tax excise, there's the whole line item for externalities. There's already a carbon tax on our petrol. we don't need any more. That's already covered. The externalities are covered. Now, what you're trying to get out of is these other items, which is the actual road use and maintenance, and you're trying to get out of those costs, and that's not fair. I'm sorry, like
they squeal about the EV taxes. I think Victoria of all places has put in some extra costs on EVs because they don't pay any fuel tax.
Yeah.
Oh god, the lobby groups squeal, mate. It's very funny.
They do. They go nuts on it. And it's like, I don't care. You have to pay to use these roads. And yeah, okay, sure. Diesel cars do have emissions, but that's factored in. That's already in there. That's a line item. The externalities are in there.
You're paying a fuel tax, mate.
Yeah, exactly. So you gotta pay to use these roads, but I know, I can see where Victoria are coming from. See, they put on the shiny face and they put on the smiley face and the shiny outcome saying everything's fine, everything looks good, and then they do something like that. And you're like, okay, hang on. So why would they be doing that? And then you think, okay, so what are the state's capabilities to raise revenue? There's not many.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. Victoria's in a bit of a pickle, so they need that cash. This isn't all rosy for them. They backed themselves into a bit of a corner, and I don't. Anyways.
And this comes back to the discussion also about privatization versus state-owned. Take a look at the state of electricity system. So in Queensland, we also are getting price rises and all the rest of it on the back of all the topics we've talked about already. But it's mostly state-owned. There's a few gas generators that are privately owned, but all the transmission, distribution, half the retailers, you've got CleanCo, Stanwell, and CS Energy, and you're about to have Queensland Hydro as well, because they're talking about some ridiculous boondoggle of the world's biggest pumped hydro.
Where is that planned for? I've heard it, and then I just thought, oh fuck, here we go. But
Pioneer Valley, it's inland from Mackay. It's going to be it's been an absolute boondoggle. There's no way it'll ever get built. It's ridiculous. It's
near Emerald.
Yeah, it's 2 stages. The plan is 2 stages of pumped hydro. So they're going to do stage 1 first. They're going to dam the Youngalla Valley, something like that. And the second stage will come later. But they're talking about 5,000 megawatts and some insane amount of storage where it's you're just like, well, take a look at Snowy Hydro, people, and what's going on there. Snowy 2, and tell me how keen you are for a massive hydro project right now in Australia. Good grief. I mean, Snowy 2 was sold as 2 billion by Malcolm Turnbull.
That was never gonna
when
work.
the prices came in, it was closer to 5. And now it's looking like it's probably going to be 10, and that's just for the construction of it. And then you've got 3 to 5 for the transmission. It's going to be. I don't know what to do about it.
It's going to be $20 billion because nuclear is too expensive. That's that's a lie. We got to spend $20 billion because nuclear is too expensive. This is where we go with all these. Anyways, Benny, it's been great chatting today. I think we should get out of here. We've been talking for almost 2.5 hours, man. Jesus Christ. Anyways, it's been fantastic talking to you. It's good. I've followed you on Twitter for a while, and it's always good content, and it's nice having these chats. But yes, we'll get you back on sometime, and we'll talk more about this.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate the feedback. I'll try and keep it clean and good content for you.
Oh, the dirtier the better. That's why I'm there.
That's for those weird people who send messages and they've been on Twitter since like 2015, but they've got 3 followers and now they're texting you about food.
Yeah,
like,
no,
delete.
I know. Oh, I'm only there for the laughs. I only go on Twitter for the laughs and for entertainment. The entertainment and sometimes to learn things. And I learn a lot from you, so that's really cool. Keep at it. I think it's good.
Learning is important.
Very good, man. Well, have a good night, and I'll upload this shortly. So once again, I'll be here Monday to Fridays, just doing my normal react to your daily Twitters. But yeah, so I guess tomorrow morning I'll be putting another video up as well. But anyways, thank you for dropping in today, and it's been fantastic. And I will talk to you shortly, I guess. Peace.